Rachel. I'm going to be talking about onboarding with 3box user data cloud today. So yeah, this is me. I'm the DevRel lead. My Twitter handle is Rachel B London. Always like more followers. We've also got our 3box one, which is 3box DB as well. So today I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we're doing at 3box and giving some context, and then I'll kind of talk a little bit more specifically about how 3box can help with onboarding and some of the benefits there. But yeah, this is what the problem that we're solving, and it's something that we all know to be true, that user data is broken on the web. And this is kind of, it's got two kind of effects. One, for users, we're very kind of fearful and worried about what's happening to our data, and we don't have any transparency or agency. But there's also, on the developer side, we're kind of having to manage like quite complicated systems specifically for user data, and it can be very stressful, and also not your, not your value proposition, not what you really want to be building as a developer, but something, you need to build so that you can actually use. And there's also risks, of course, of GDPR and stuff. People are becoming much more aware of these problems. So we're actually, along with the kind of other people in the decentralized identity space, we're advocating for a kind of paradigm shift in terms of how we think about data. And this diagram is quite nice because it kind of shows the kind of difference conceptually. So over here on the left, we can see that we have, our traditional kind of Web 2 applications that we're used to dealing with, like Facebook or government sites or whichever startup, whatever. And we're always creating a new profile, storing new user data under each of those applications. Basically, it's all organized around the applications, and it's not organized around the user. And then over here on the right, we can see the kind of change, the shift that we're looking to kind of go for, and that's actually putting data under the control of the users. So it's always sitting within the user's control, and then applications have the ability to kind of access this given the user's consent, but it's still, they're kind of moving to more of a model where they're kind of consuming data, but they're not managing it. So it's kind of quite a different way to think about how we organize data and applications. So yeah, this is like the Web 2 world, but we also know in like the Web 3 space that, often we're using like addresses as the kind of identity piece. And although it kind of doesn't have the same pitfalls you might have in a centralized system, it's clearly not giving you the full scope of what you could do. And this was something Vitalik actually mentioned when I was at ETH London a couple of weeks ago, just the kind of limitations of working with an address-based identity for the ecosystem, and there's much more potential if we go beyond that. So yeah, this is decentralized identity. We're kind of working at 3box with decentralized identity. Our founders, they originally came from Newport, so they've been very much embedded in this industry, in this sector for a while. They've got some very deep knowledge there. But of course, there's other players involved, and this is kind of all working together to try and make this kind of paradigm shift that will give much more kind of a much fairer and better way to process identity. So yeah, the benefits, these are just some of them. Of course, using the system is going to give users more agency and transparency of their data, and that's empowering. We can give users cryptographic control of their data, so they're able to kind of encrypt things, sign for things. We can use data across applications. I'm going to come on to talk a little bit more about that and kind of give some examples, and you'll see how that can be really nice. Users, of course, don't have to give away all of their data to any application. They can actually granularly manage who has access to their different data points there. And hopefully we can build systems that are going to stop user data being the product, which we've seen a lot of in Web 2, and let's build some applications that offer users true value instead. So now that's kind of the mission and the problem we're solving. I'm going to move on to talk a little bit more about what we're building here at 3box and be a little bit more specific. So I have this diagram. Just one sec. Now this is really a very high level architecture view of the technology that we're working with at 3box. So you can see here that we are integrating with Ethereum wallets. So is there a question there? Cool, good to go.
Cool.
Cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, we've got we can work with kind of any Web3 enabled wallet. And then we actually persist data onto IPFS. So we're storing user data on IPFS. But then we have what is called a 3ID. And this is sort of our DID. If anyone's familiar with the kind of decentralized identity spec, this is our DID that we're kind of building there. That is actually derived from a signed message from the user's wallet. So signed message by their private key. And from that, we're able to generate the DID and the keys that are used to kind of encrypt the user's data and sign the user's data there as well. So that's kind of the 3 IDs that I guess like the glue that kind of like holds it all together. And then in your decentralized application, you can actually pull in one of our APIs, one of our SDKs, and you can start working with 3box, and you can start managing like users' data. You can start using the 3ID to encrypt and store data, but you can do that all from the front end as well. So this is kind of just a very high level view of how things play together. It's really nice actually, because something we are very much advocating for is going for this kind of world in which apps are using data rather than managing it. And as I said, this can make your life like a lot easier as a developer, because it removes like a huge chunk of complexity. And we can see this here because like if you have like your awesome dApp, and I know there's a lot of awesome dApps in development at the moment, which is cool. And you have like several components. So you probably have your app logic, and that, often can actually live in the client and in the front end. You might be using blockchain, whether it's a payments or a smart contract. But then you can see everything here in the square over on the right. This is actually being, managed by 3box, using the 3ID, which lives under kind of the user's control. But it's actually giving you all of this kind of storage and all this functionality that you don't have to actually kind of set up, and you don't actually have to kind of, you can kind of use it rather than manage it essentially. So it's pretty cool. And yeah, for developers, this is awesome because it gives us a distributed database storage. And we do this. So obviously we're working with existing technologies. We're working with, we're storing stuff in IPFS. IPFS, as we know, is just kind of file storage. We use OrbitDB, which gives the database structure on top of that. But it actually, in our APIs, we've abstracted a lot of that complexity away. So you don't, as an end user developer, you don't really need to worry about running your own IPFS node or working with OrbitDB. That's all kind of set up for you. So it makes life easier, which is always good. And then using 3box, we can build data-rich applications. What do we mean by data-rich? If we look at like kind of the first sort of offerings of like dApps, as it were, people were, very much relying on on-chain data. And of course, it's problematic for a lot of use cases because it's very slow and it's expensive and it's gas costs and it's not suitable for kind of most data that might live in an application. This is, of course, data that users are kind of used to experiencing. They're used to having apps that are kind of, very rich. That's the experience they have in Web 2. So 3box can actually provide a very convenient way to store data off chain, to kind of give that more kind of similar functionality that they're already accustomed to. And then finally, the last thing here is we can actually do all this as an end developer. You only need to, sorry. You only need to work with front end code. It's really nice, especially for somebody like me, because I'm a React developer mainly by trade. You don't need to kind of run your own IPFS node. You don't need to think about running a centralized server. It's pretty quick to get going, and you can build stuff in a nice kind of front end first way. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of some of our development tools and APIs that are available there. We have Spaces and Profiles. So Spaces and Profiles, in some ways they're quite similar. But basically, if we start with Spaces, it's a context-specific way to kind of store data, and it's a key value store by nature. So yeah, you can create whatever, you can namespace it however you want. Like a lot of people would typically be creating one space for their application, but of course, you might want to be more granular than that, depending on your needs and architecture. But this is all a user-controlled database. So because we're using decentralized identity and the kind of cryptographic pairs around the 3ID, we're able to encrypt data with those keys, and that means it would be stored privately. We can also just store it we can store it unencrypted if it's suitable to store it publicly as well. So there's the two options there, really. Profiles functions very similar to Spaces, but it was actually the kind of first product that we launched with. So those of you who've been following 3box for sort of just over the year that we've been around will already be familiar with this. It's just like a kind of global space storage. So we see this used for like usernames, global avatars, something that we'd want to kind of put in the kind of global scope and used across applications. Again, user controlled, and users have the option to kind of store, you can either set data to be stored as private or public, depending on your use case. And you can also add your own attributes. So like if you want to create a new kind of attribute to the profiles, like the global profiles, you can also do that as well. Threads is actually a really important API for us because this is our collaborative data sharing API. So this is where you can have you can have groups communicating together. It's really good for anything sociable, basically. So yes, it says messaging, shared, list, content feeds, etc. And there's quite a number of different ways that you can kind of configure threads. So we have like open threads that are viewable by anyone. We have a kind of members threads, which, you can set the members to it. We have personal threads, which you can just have like just for one user. And also we recently, I think just a couple of weeks ago, we launched confidential threads. That was a big release for us because really cool. It meant that we could actually have encrypted kind of messaging within those groups. So you can kind of have a private group chat or a private content feed and set that up there as well. We can also break threads into two more ways. We have persistent threads. Persistent threads, they are like, as the name suggests, they're actually persisted to IPFS. So good for something that you want to make sure is available. So like a content feed would be a good persistent thread candidate. We also have ghost threads. Now, ghost threads are just a pure peer-to-peer memory messaging. So typically very good for like chat boxes and kind of more ephemeral communication. So those are essentially our APIs. We do have another API, which I haven't spoken about on this slide, and that's our identity wallet SDK. That's really for anyone who's building with a wallet, so you can actually like bake 3box directly in there as well. And then finally, we also have these plugins. So kind of developer experience and making things easy for developers to work with has always been a kind of core principle for us at 3box. And we noticed that, some things just keep cropping up time and time again, and you'll always need, so like profile hovers, a way to edit your profile, comment box, chat box. These are kind of pretty ubiquitous. So we thought, hey, let's make some React plugins that we can just like drop in and like make them available to the community. So that's something that's really nice, and it's just quick and easy to play with. But of course, underneath, it's using the APIs. So yeah, that's just a quick whirlwind of 3box. But then I wanted to also talk a little bit more about onboarding, mainly because I know this is like the House of Adoption and just kind of making it a little bit relevant here. There's quite a number of different ways that 3box can really help with onboarding. One of those is you get instant user profiles. Now, I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. But basically what it means is that users who've already created their 3box profile, whether they've done that on our 3box hub or in another application, if they access a new application, it's already going to be populated with their username and their profile, etc. So, it's really nice, and it makes things kind of friendly for users who are already on the system, and it takes quite a lot of the pain away, which I think kind of comes to the second point here is, it kind of removes that really annoying kind of account creation chore and like picking the picture, choosing the name. It's kind of tedious, and you don't necessarily want to do that. Another thing that's quite nice is because with 3box we kind of have, because it's like the data is kind of structured within like what we call the user data cloud. It's just basically our kind of system where we're using like IPFS to store data. That means that, the data doesn't have to like live under the control of one application. So things like users' social graph can be ported across from applications. So it's really nice to kind of make it easier to bring people across and kind of take away that lock-in that we often see, especially with like Web 2 applications. So I think that can definitely be a really big bonus in terms of like helping onboard people, that we can kind of like tap into, build up networks and then transfer them across our ecosystem as well. It's quite nice. Also, you can do stuff like having multiple wallets per identity, which is definitely an advantage over using like a kind of address-based system. Like if users have like a different wallet on their phone versus their desktop, and they want to access your application, across devices, then this can actually really help it and make it, much nicer as well to work with. So yeah, I was actually just going to jump over, and I'm hoping you can also see the screen that I'm showing now, which is the Sablia.me. This is a really cool 3-box integration that came out a couple of weeks ago. The team is pretty awesome. And basically it's like, I think it's essentially like a kind of a little bit like PayPal.me, but of course like the Sablia version of that. So I just visited this site. It's integrated with 3-box. I'd never even signed up with Sablia before, or not even their main app. And I visited it, and I was able to just like within one click, just click in, and it would pull in my 3-box profile, because my 3-box profile is attached to like my MetaMask here. And then you can see it's actually pulled in my my global avatar. It's got my username. Let's close MetaMask. And then some other bits of information there as well. So instantly it's like feeling a lot more like home and like much more friendly to use, which I think this is a really great user experience, because we all know that kind of onboarding users is such a pain point in the user journey, that like, let's make it a bit nicer for them as well. And the other thing I was going to show you, which was also a recent integration, was DAO Stack, Alchemy DAO Stack. And I think this was used quite extensively in East Denver. That's where we set up our 3-box DAO. And you can see here that, again, we have all of our profiles here. This is a 3-box team. And we didn't actually have to kind of set any of this in the application. This is purely pulling from our profiles API, which is pretty cool. And you can go into some of the other DAOs and have a look. If users have already set up their 3-box profile, you should see it there. So I think, where is it? I was going to have a look at, so for example, if we look at DApp Hero, we can jump in over here and we can see, okay, cool, who's part of DApp Hero. And then we can see our cool Denison's in there, and we can start to already feel a bit familiar with our applications, and it's, just a nicer user experience, essentially. But yeah, and I also was going to show a 3box.hub, which is, we set this up as basically a kind of like dog feeding application. So everything that you can see, well, you can use it to set your profile, but you can also set your profile in any application. But a lot of people come to 3box.hub first of all. It's something that we built to kind of test our APIs and our SDKs. But it's not our core product. It's just to demonstrate what's possible. And if I go in here, sometimes it does get a little bit slow especially when I'm doing kind of screen sharing. So hopefully it will play nice. But yeah, this is a great place to kind of check out like the functionality. We have a lot of our kind of plugins baked in here and used, so you can kind of have a feel for that as well. But everything that is in 3box Hub is portable into your application as well. So don't think of it as like you have to create a 3box profile on Hub. You can do that inside an application. So it's pretty open like that. So that's kind of pretty much what I was going to talk about in terms of like onboarding users. I'm like really excited. We're having a lot of, I think we had like 19, or we had like 40% of the finalists over at East Denver building with 3box, and it was pretty exciting to see everything that they were building. So that was that was cool. Also, just another little announcement. We are going to be taking part of the Dragon Quest Hackathon. I think that's kicking off the 1st of April. We're going to be sponsoring Bounty, so yeah, keep a lookout for that. But we're really excited to be part of the Meta Cartel community in that event. It's going to be, I think it's going to be wicked, and also it's great timing because everyone's locked in their house. So I think it's going to be some stiff competition, but like the place to be. So that's cool. Yeah, also we're hiring. So if you or anyone you know is interested in a technical product manager role, definitely speak to me or visit our website. Yeah, and then finally, our community is really open. We have quite an active Discord channel. Anyone who is interested in 3box or wants to build on 3box or just has any questions, like jump in there. Our whole team is always in there, and we use that day to day as well. Of course, we've got docs, and all of our code is on GitHub as well. So yeah, that's, I guess, build better with 3box. Yeah, I'll just unshare my screen.
That was an awesome presentation.
Thank you.
Is there any questions around people? Maybe about hackathon or bounties, identity? Yeah, I guess I have a small question though. So right now, like 3box is awesome. I think it's a very big step from having like your own private key and managing on it through like a console and making sure nobody steals it, up to something like a 3box profile where you just throw your avatar profile, like Twitter or something, and then you just use it and it works pretty seamlessly. But you know, from a very simple person perspective, like the mass adoption comes when anyone can just jump in with email and password. But right now we're on this level when you have to use MetaMask and link everything to your address. How do you think if this leap will happen when you go bend into MetaMask to, I don't know, bend into Facebook, stupidly enough, but for mass adoption, or like email or something like this, but still work good with blockchains?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a very good question. I mean,
It's
obviously there's like a lot of, I mean, wallet UX is kind of, it's like a whole topic, and like at the moment it's, you know, we are seeing a lot of things that do require a lot of learning. In terms of what we do, 3box itself, we're not in the business of building wallets. Like we're integratable with like MetaMask, Portis, Fortmatic, any Web3 enabled wallet. And really, actually, like the technology itself, I mean, you're right. You could have that completely abstracted away from the end user, so they are using, you know, an email and a password, and it's much more familiar. But underneath the hood, that would still be giving them kind of cryptographic control over their data. But like at the moment, I guess it's kind of like we don't really want to be kind of solving the wallet problem, just because we know there's a lot of people who are like very good at that in this space and probably would be a lot better than, you know, than we are at doing it. And it doesn't make sense for us to kind of roll our own wallet. But it's nice that we can kind of provide, it's like we provide this little glue between like some already existing technology like IPFS, OrbitDB, and wallets, and just like stitching it up in a like a very user-centric and user-controlled way. So that's where we really see us providing value. And at the moment, we are, you know, very much focused on the Ethereum ecosystem. We've always been with this kind of since day one. So the kind of end users that we're seeing of a lot of our applications are kind of familiar with this ecosystem, and they are familiar with MetaMask. But 100%, it would be really good to see these kind of use it like self-sovereign or these kind of decentralized identity technologies becoming baked into more mainstream applications. So, you know, hopefully we're going to see that soon. You know, maybe not straight away, but it would be awesome to see that technology more widely adopted.